The one person who had a constitutional duty to tell the American people our president is not fit was the vice president, Kamala Harris. But of course she went along with the cover-up, participated actively in it, total lies, in order to cover up the fact that the president was a puppet who's not running the country. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show on the road from the campaign trail. I've got a really great update for you because it's been a very busy week. We'll get to that in a second. I'm going to start today by talking about the big story that actually brings together a national story and a California story. That, of course, is Joe Biden and the cover-up of the fact that he was clearly incapable of being president and Kamala Harris's role in that. We'll get to that in a second. I also have a great guest joining us today. She has just announced a run for state legislature in California. She is a very high energy, effective person who is going to be fantastic if she makes it to Sacramento. So we'll meet her later on. And Shelley is joining us with all the latest from California. But let's start with this Biden story, which to me is, I don't want to even say shocking, because it's not. We knew everything here. I mean, there are a couple of details that are emerging. Of course, the thing that's prompted this into the headlines is this new book, Original Sin, by Jake Tapper from CNN and Alex Thompson from Axios. And they've been given an unbelievably hard time, and especially Jake Tapper, rightly so, because they're complaining in this book about the cover-up, about Joe Biden's mental condition. But they, of course, were part of it. That is an important aspect. But I want to go right back to the beginning. And really get to why this matters so much. Because the idea that this is something new, that this needs a book to uncover all this, is of course ridiculous. Many of us were saying all along that Joe Biden was not fit to be president. And when I say all along, I don't just mean during the end of his term in office, looking ahead to him potentially running for a second term. I mean, before the first time. Those of you who watch my Fox News show, you would see, I mean, pretty much every Sunday, we had a segment on the show. I mean, looking back now, it's not exactly funny, but we called it the Joe Biden comedy segment. We had like a nice animation to introduce the segment. Why? Because I found myself week after week playing clips of Biden completely messing things up. And it wasn't just, oh, this is Biden and he makes gaffes. That word was used all the time. Do you remember about Biden? Gaffes. Oh, that's just Joe Biden. He makes gaffes. I said at the time, this is not gaffes. This is someone who clearly is not cognitively okay. This is way beyond just normal politician gaffes or even, Joe Biden gaffes over the decades he's been in public life. And so we said that every single Sunday almost. We played these clips. And I said, how can someone like this seriously put themselves forward to be president? And of course, the reason that happened and the way that happened is the story of this whole thing. And it goes right to the heart of the Democratic Party today. And it looks into the future of California if Kamala Harris is the candidate. And let me explain why. The reason that Biden became president is the same reason that this was all covered up, and including by Kamala Harris. And it's the same reason she would be such a disaster as governor of California if that's what she chooses to run for. It's all about that word machine. The machine got behind Biden. You remember Jim Clyburn in South Carolina, I believe it was. That was the moment that it was all clinched for Biden. And he mobilized the machine, the Democratic Party machine, to back Biden, said he's the guy. We don't want Bernie Sanders getting this. He's running away with it in the primaries. So the machine got behind Biden, knowing how useless he was. But that's what suited the Democrat machine, because that meant they could control him. That was the whole point of Biden, that he was useless, weak, cognitively impaired, not capable of actually leading. That's why he was the perfect candidate for them. So then they get him elected, and he declines even further. And it's visible to all of us. And every time we made this point, it was dismissed as vicious, cruel, personal attacks. Leave him alone. He lost his son. All this kind of stuff. Like it was wrong to even bring it up when it was clear. We saw with our own eyes that he couldn't do the job. But they said it was off limits to even raise it. These people who are now talking about a cover-up. Absolutely unbelievable. But the machine didn't care because the machine was running the show. We had a puppet president for all these years. I mean, just one detail that stood out for me. This is not actually from the book. This is before the Jake Tapper book. And remember, I've worked inside of a government at the highest level in 10 Downing Street. And I've seen how things work. And this particular detail, to me, is just so shocking that Joe Biden, President Biden, when he's president of the United States, when he was meeting one-to-one with his senior officials, including the specific example that I'm thinking of here, his defense secretary. You couldn't get a more serious and sensitive conversation than that between a president and his defense secretary. Internal conversation. This is not a press conference or a speech or he's on public display. He had scripted meetings. One-to-one meetings with his defense secretary were scripted. Well, who's writing the script? Who's actually in charge here? And that's what we're learning. This is new information from the Jake Tapper book. 4 or 5 people. Steve Ricchetti, the corrupt lobbyist, been with Biden all along. I had a whole Swamp Watch segment on him on my show. Mike Donlan, his political guy. Jill Biden, of course. These are the people that were actually running the country. And little sort of hints of it came out. And people would say, oh, Biden has good days and bad days. You can't have bad days if you're the president of the United States. What are you talking about? What if something happens on a bad day for Biden? Do you remember during this period, we were told, oh, he only really works between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Great. What if there's a crisis at 6:30 in the evening? I mean, it's just so outrageous that we had this puppet president from the people who endlessly lecture us about our democracy. The whole point of Biden, really, the only argument they made in 2020 and again in 2024, when they were still pushing him, was, oh, he's going to save democracy from Trump. He's going to save democracy. The guy who's just a cipher for a bunch of aides who are actually running the country, who no one ever voted for. This is saving democracy? It's just unbelievable. The arrogance of these people, the shamelessness of these people to do this to all of us, to America, and then sort of pontificate about how they're saving democracy. How dare they? That's why this is so serious. We had a puppet president, like, I don't know, Andropov or Chernenko in the dying days of the Soviet Union. He clearly wasn't able to carry out the functions of the presidency. And that brings us to Kamala Harris, because that term, that phrase, carrying out the functions of the presidency, that's the whole point of the 25th Amendment and the provisions there for removing a president who can't carry out the functions of the presidency, as Biden clearly couldn't. The one person who had a constitutional duty to address this subject and to tell the American people, our president is not fit, cannot do the job, was the vice president, Kamala Harris. But of course, she went along with the cover-up, participated actively in it, most egregiously after the Her report came out. And you had that line in the Her report about Biden being an elderly gentleman with a poor memory, whatever it was. And then Kamala Harris goes out and said, no, that's outrageous, it's gratuitous, it's false. I see Joe Biden, he's fantastic, he's full of strength, all that stuff. Total lies, not just, let's give it some soft word like spin or whatever. No, these were lies. She lied in order to cover up the fact that the president was a puppet who was not running the country, not doing his duty, not doing the job that he was elected to do. And neither was she, because it was her duty to take action, and she didn't. Why? Because she too, just like Biden, is a machine politician, and her role in all of this was just to play the game in the hope that she would win the game. What does that mean? She went along with the cover-up in the first term, went along with the obvious fiction that Biden could serve a second term, because she hoped that was the way that she would become president. Someone who's had a disaster every time she's run for the presidency. Her first primary campaign flamed out, now with the second one was a disaster. So she was hoping she would get there by Biden being re-elected. She knew what a state he was in. I assumed that he wouldn't make it all the way through a second term, and that she would thereby become president. That's what it was all about for her. Absolutely outrageous. Personal ambition, vanity, ego, narcissism ahead of the public interest, ahead of her constitutional duty. That's Kamala Harris. We know now about her character and her judgment. And that brings us to California, because she's thinking seriously about running for governor of California. Every few weeks, there's another story saying, oh, she'll let us know in the summer. And so she may well be my opponent. And so I've thought about this a lot. And it will be an issue. And it will not go away. Why? Because it goes to who she is and what kind of politician she is. She's a machine politician. She will be controlled by the machine. Just as Biden and the whole operation was controlled by the Democratic machine at the federal level when he was president, she's going to be controlled by the machine if she ever were elected governor. And that is a major argument, because it will go to policy as well as her personality, character, and judgment and integrity, which are all shot to pieces. We can see that. She will be controlled by the machine, just as Biden was, just as all these Democrats who are machine politicians don't believe in anything. They don't have any convictions. They don't have any really strong views about what they're going to do. That's why you see Biden on every single issue all over the place over his career, saying whatever needs to be said to climb the ladder of personal ambition. Same exact thing with Kamala Harris. One minute she's tough on crime, the next minute she's criminal justice reform, all over the place. One minute she's Green New Deal and ban fracking, and the next minute not. One minute Medicare for all, the next minute not. She doesn't care. She doesn't believe in anything. She's a machine politician, a total creature of the Democrat machine. In California, I've called it the Democrat industrial complex. I spoke about it in the first week of this campaign. What is the Democrat industrial complex? Yes, it's the machine politicians like Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom's another one, Karen Bass in Los Angeles, the unions who fund their campaigns. We saw just last week in the budget, Gavin Newsom, massive giveaway to the public sector unions, to the government unions, and an 18% increase in spending on the bureaucracy, even at a time of deficit, when he's dipping into our reserves, to reward the government unions, who are by far his biggest donors. It will be exactly the same with Kamala Harris. So it's the machine politicians, it's the government unions who fund them and control them, the far left activists who give them their ideological instructions, and then the bureaucrats who implement what they push forward. That's the Democrat industrial complex. Kamala Harris, if she is governor of California, will be completely controlled by the Democrat machine. She's a machine politician. That's why she's a disaster. We saw that now with her role, her disgraceful role in this Joe Biden cover-up. And it's a warning to everyone in California. Steer clear of machine politicians like Kamala Harris. All they will ever do is put themselves first. Not you, not the public interest, not our state, not our country, no one except themselves. That's why we can never have Kamala Harris as governor of California. So I'm going to do something that we've been doing in a slightly kind of random way in the podcast, but I want to do it in a more organized way, which is to give you an update on the campaign, what I've been doing, what I've been seeing, what I think about all of that, but with some kind of structure to it. So I'm not just sort of randomly mentioning where I've been. And I really think that this is, such a fantastic opportunity, this campaign, for really understanding what's going on in our state and what we can do about it. That's why it's so great to be on the road. Everywhere I go, I meet incredible people. You learn so much from the people you meet. As you know, I've been working on the issues that face California for many years now. I've written a book, Califalia, all about that. So, it's not like I'm starting from scratch. I've really put a lot of work in. But actually, now when you're really in a structured and organized way, meeting people on the campaign trail, it's just so incredibly instructive. But I want to start this week with where I kicked off the week, which was on Sunday evening. And the word that comes to mind for the first kind of few stops this week on the campaign trail is life. We did an event in Calvary Chapel in San Jose. It was an amazing moment for me because it just brought home something we talked about the previous week. Do you remember the previous week we went to the French Laundry and did a press conference at the French Laundry where we looked back at the outrageous behavior of Gavin Newsom in particular, the lockdowns, the school closures, and so on. And I made a pledge that when I'm elected governor, we'll have a COVID accountability commission to make sure that we investigate everything that went into those decisions and make sure that we learn from that and make sure it doesn't happen again. In particular, in relation to school closures, investigate, just as I was talking about the Democrat machine and the unions, we investigate the connection between potential donations from the teachers' unions and Gavin Newsom's decision to allow the longest and most severe and most destructive school closures in the country. So that was all last week. And then on Sunday night in Calvary Chapel, I spoke at this event, I think it's called Standing Free. I met this guy, Pastor Mike, who's the pastor there, and he and his church are still, all these years on, being prosecuted, I would say persecuted, by Gavin Newsom, by the state government, by the county, Santa Clara County in this case. Remember, Santa Clara County was the first lockdown in the country. Dr. Sarah Cody was the public health bureaucrat who called for the lockdown. But as I said at the time, it wasn't because it was the right decision for this particular situation. I mean, I want to go back over all of that, but this takes you back to the conversations with Jay Bhattacharya. That's when I met Jay. I was the first to put him on television. He was at Stanford, near where I am. We looked at the data on how COVID was incredibly infectious, very transmissible. There's no way you could hope to stop it with lockdowns. The important thing was to protect those who are most vulnerable. We have the clear data on that: elderly people, those with conditions that were pre-existing, etc. Right? We knew that's all going back to the early days of the pandemic. But Sarah Cody was the public health director for Santa Clara County, ordered the first ever lockdown. And that was based not on any analysis of COVID. It was an off-the-shelf plan for a potential bioterrorism attack. So it was a different plan for a completely different situation. Nevertheless, she imposed it. The next day, the other Bay Area counties followed suit. The day after that, or maybe 2 days after that, Gavin Newsom ordered statewide lockdown. So that's how it all started. All of the lot in Santa Clara County. That's where it all began. This madness, this cruel and destructive madness that lasted for so long, in particular here in California. Well, anyway, this church where I was on Sunday night was in Santa Clara County. And guess what? This was one of the early signs of the resistance. This church, Calvary Chapel, Pastor Mike, he opened the church and they did services and in the parking lot, all this stuff, right? We saw that report at the time. But unbelievably, they are still pursuing him. They're fining him. 4 or 5 separate prosecutions underway. Still today, he's fighting this, even though we know that it was all unjustified, that we were right, they were wrong. Gavin Newsom is still prosecuting this church. It is just unbelievable. And what were they trying to do? They were trying to serve the community, provide for people's spiritual needs, bring life to this awful situation. It was just unbelievable. They're still being prosecuted. So when I did that press conference outside the French Laundry, I said, this is looking back, but we have to hold these people accountable. But it's not just looking back. It's still going on. The COVID persecution. Absolutely unbelievable. We're never going to let these people forget. I'm telling you, I'm not going to let this drop. But I was thinking about life because, of course, the next day, and you may have seen this if you follow me on X, where we document what I'm doing on the campaign trail and so on. I went to Palm Springs because this weekend just passed, we had this appalling bombing in Palm Springs of an IVF clinic, a place that represents everything that we should cherish: life and hope and love, beautiful children being brought into the world as the parents hope through that process. And of course, this awful nihilistic bomber, motivated by this ideology of anti-natalism, as they call it. And the point I made when I went to the site and saw what happened is something I feel very strongly about. And I want to be really clear about what I'm saying here. I'm not saying people on the left, politicians on the left, are responsible for the actions of this terrorist in Palm Springs. But there is a continuum. And what you're seeing now has become mainstream on the left, this ideology that somehow it's wrong to bring children into the world. You hear this all the time. How can we bring children into this world with all the existential threat of climate change? It's always about climate, right? Oh, it's terrible. They're going to be consuming resources and carbon emission, all this, right? Wrong to bring children into the world. They say that. AOC speaks like that. Harry and Meghan, with all their privilege and their children and their mansion in Montecito. They've spoken like this. And it's the same ideology. So this guy's obviously an extreme, violent, nut job terrorist. I mean, he died in this bombing. Thankfully, no one else did. But we've got to push back on this because it gets to, again, I'm not trying to overstate it, but it is part of this ideology of scarcity. Many times I've spoken about scarcity versus abundance, right? This ideology of scarcity. So many of the things that are going wrong in California and make this the most expensive place in America, the highest cost for housing, rent, water, gas, utility, everything, electricity, is driven by this ideology of scarcity. You know, we can't build the water storage we need. We can't have power generation. It has to all be wind and solar because that's the only thing that's allowed because it's renewable. And we can't have single family homes. We can't expand and create suburbs where families can raise children in the kind of home that they want, where the kids can play in the yard and enjoy our weather. No, all has to be apartment buildings in the downtown area near transit. It has to be transit, and we can't have people driving cars because that's bad. And so it's just all so dark and nihilistic and unnecessary. So it's all the same thing, actually. Of course, the bomber in Palm Springs, the extreme end, let's just be clear. But it's part of this ideology of scarcity. Can't have children, can't have single family homes, can't do this, can't do that. It's bad for climate, bad for the environment. It's anti-human. It's anti-growth. It's like we're the problem. It's like saying people are pollution. Children, babies are pollution. We have to stop it. It's so bad. It's so dark. It's horrible. But this is what the left has become. It really is mainstream on the left, this ideology of scarcity. Now, it's being challenged, including from the left. And that's what Ezra Klein's book, Abundance, was all about. And I totally agree with it. I've said this many times in many of our policy papers. Literally the paper on water at Golden Together, my policy organization, is called Water Abundance. So I believe in it, and we've got the policies to make it happen in California. That's what I want to do. We can have the best and most of everything. We can build outside of the existing development footprint. People say, oh, you can't build because we need density and you can't do sprawl. They call it sprawl. I call it the California dream. We already have one of the highest levels of housing density in the country. Only barely 5% of our land is developed. If we just increased it to 6%, we'd still be in the middle of the pack nationally, but you'd have space for 10 million more households in wonderful single family homes where they can raise their children. So we can have all this abundance. Yes, but we have to challenge the leftist ideology of scarcity. And then on the way out of Palm Springs, you saw another indication of it. Just driving out, you may have seen the video that I posted at the sort of northern end of the Coachella Valley. You've got these massive wind farms, totally disgusting, ugly wind farms, disfiguring the landscape. They're ruining this beautiful desert landscape. And the most infuriating thing, most of the time, most of them are not even working. You've got these monstrosities stuck there in the desert, and the turbines aren't even going round, most of them. And we saw it again. And it's so infuriating. And this is what you get from this ideology of scarcity, which you can't have affordable, reliable power generation, for example, through gas-fired power stations fueled by gas that we have here in California that could be creating jobs. No, that's no good. That's bad for climate. You have to have these totally useless, unreliable, incredibly expensive wind turbines. And it's just so unbelievably infuriating. And the journey from the Coachella Valley took me to another meeting that was so infuriating, in many ways wonderful, but also infuriating, which was a meeting with In-N-Out Burger, iconic California company and brand. Everyone knows In-N-Out Burger. Everyone loves In-N-Out Burger. And I met at their headquarters with Lindsay Snyder, who's the owner of In-N-Out Burger. It's a family business, and her executive team. I wanted to learn about the reality of trying to run a business like that in California. And it's just even worse than you think. The ridiculous rules and regulations that, again, driven by this kind of leftist ideology that's totally impractical. The way they experience it is that there's a war being waged on them by the people in charge in California, by Gavin Newsom in alliance with the unions who are his donors. And they're basically trying to crush companies like In-N-Out Burger, because they see them as the enemy. I mean, what are you talking about? They create good jobs for people. They create a wonderful experience for their customers and their communities. It's just so ridiculous, but they're being crushed to death. All In-N-Out Burgers expansion, when they're thinking about new stores to open, new restaurants to open outside California. I mean, they're moving the headquarters outside of California. It's just a crime what's going on. I mean, just specific examples like one they were telling me just to build a new store, even on land or some kind of building that's in their supply chain, like a warehouse or something. The same exact thing takes 18 months, let's say in Tennessee, where they're just about to expand into. Here in California, 5, 6, 7 years for the exact same thing. Even if they already own the land and it's already developed in California, it takes that long. Whereas in Tennessee, they're going from scratch and they don't own it and they have to go through new permits and everything. It's done in a fraction of the time. Everything, the labor costs, they've got this fast food council in California, which is basically like a communist regime where you have the government and the unions on this board with the fast food companies telling them how to run their business. It's just completely insane what's going on in California. But they have to put up with it and they try and fight back. You know, they've now got campaigns against them in Los Angeles and other cities where you've got the unions, you know, working with the Democrat politicians to pass bills to force them to unionize, all this kind of stuff. It's just going to make it so expensive and impossible. So there's just such a lot of work to do to fight back against this, but we can do it. That's why I'm running to stop all this, because this war on business in California, it's really serious. It's driving the wealth creators, the job creators out of our state. And I think we're on the brink of something really bad if we don't turn this around. I mean, we had for most of last year, the highest unemployment in the country. And it's not surprising when you're taxing businesses, you're taking money from the business. We have the highest taxes in the country, that we're taking money from the businesses and handing it to the government. That's money that's not creating a job. And that's why we have the highest unemployment. And you have businesses driven out of the state, just as we saw with In-N-Out. They're not expanding here. They're not creating new jobs. They're doing it in other states. And you see that right across the board with all businesses that are just thinking about leaving. I mean, I was with a finance guy, every single business I talk to, whatever size, and so of course we're thinking of leaving, or we have left, or whatever. It's unbelievably bad out there when you talk to businesses. We have to end this war on business. It's unbelievable that we're in this situation, but we are. But then at the end of that day, we ended up somewhere so beautiful that reminded me what this fight is all about. We ended up on the coast in Orange County, South County, so beautiful along that coast. And there's a town there that I'd not really visited before, San Clemente. It's where Richard Nixon had what was known as the Winter White House. Beautiful, beautiful town. And we just went down. It was sunset, and you're at the beach. And you got this incredible sunset and the pier and the palm trees and wonderful casita-style buildings with the sort of red tile roofs everywhere. It's so stunning and spectacular, beautiful downtown. And it just reminded me what an incredibly special place California is and why it's worth fighting for. And then the opposite. If that was the beauty of California captured in that wonderful seaside town. Remember, I grew up in a seaside town in Brighton, in Sussex in England. So I really get that seaside town vibe. But the next day, we were in downtown Los Angeles. You may have seen the video I made, where you're in this, America's second city, Los Angeles, downtown LA, about to welcome the world for the Olympics. And you just come out of where we were staying. And as I said, apologetically on this video I made, I'm sorry to put it like this, very blunt, but literally the whole place stinks of piss and shit. And there's no other way of describing it. This is what you get from 15 years in Los Angeles, many, many more years of Democrat one-party rule. No challenge, no accountability. They think they can get away with everything, with massively increasing taxes, giving worse and worse services, all just a disaster. I had a round table with business owners and downtown Los Angeles business owners just in despair at what's going on, the homelessness that's been going on for so long, the crime and the squalor, just the squalor of it, the degradation, the dirt, the stink, the roads that are in such terrible condition, the potholes, and they pay the highest taxes anywhere in the country. I mean, this is just unbelievable how mismanaged this state, that city is. But we can't give up. And that really is the message of this campaign. I'm taping this just at the beginning of a day where we're in the Central Valley in California, Tulare, about to visit our farmers. They're being crushed. And everywhere you go, this is the final thing I'll say. The people I talk to, whether it's families and businesses of all kinds and all sizes, the word that comes across about what their experience of life is like in California today is struggle. It's such a sad thing, this sense of struggle. It's such a struggle to do anything in California, to live, to raise your family, to do anything, to build anything, to run a business. It's such a struggle. But the good news is that as governor, that's one of the most immediate things I could do to turn that around, because so many of the things that are causing the struggle are coming out of the executive branch in Sacramento, the bureaucracies, the agencies, all of those parts of the state government that Gavin Newsom has just expanded by 18%, unbelievably, as a payoff to his donors. Well, I can go in the other direction. Make life easier, less of a struggle for families and businesses. And that is the whole point of this campaign. All right, joining us now, it's Susan Shelley. Great to see Susan. We got a lot going on. I'm on the road, and I just saw a story. Kevin Kiley celebrating because he got a real result for California for common sense on EV mandates and all of this. What's been going on?
Well, the Senate voted today to pass resolutions that the House had already passed, so they're going to the president's desk. This is an accomplished feat, and congratulations to Kevin Kiley and everyone who worked so hard on it. What has happened here is that some late regulations, some late waivers that were approved by the Biden administration in the waning days before he left office have been reversed. And what are these? California has a special waiver from the Clean Air Act that allows it to set its own tougher emissions standards. And California has used this in recent years to set climate change policy that affects the automobile industry, the truck industry, and virtually everything else in the country, because California is such a big market. And the manufacturers have to deal with the fact that not only California, but 16 other states have adopted at least some of these tougher emission standards. Well, the California wanted to expand that to an EV mandate where it would be illegal to sell gas-powered cars after, I think, 2035. And also a truck mandate. Dealers would have to sell at least 50% electric trucks by, I think, 2035. And they don't even exist in some cases. Tow trucks and things like that, they don't exist. So how are you going to get that 50% mandate? Is it by rationing how many gas-powered trucks you sell? So it had all these implications for the future, and California was just, we're doing this, and you have to adapt to us. So what Congress has done is use the Congressional Review Act to say, no, these affect interstate commerce, these affect the entire country, these affect the national energy industry. We are revoking the waivers from the Clean Air Act for these three particular things. One involved nitrogen oxide, NOx, and that affects emissions for everything else. So it's a rebooting of the original Clean Air Act to remove California's special right to have waivers that set standards that are incredibly expensive. The governor held a press conference with the Attorney General and two people from the California Air Resources Board, and they argued that we're all going to die of asthma, we're all going to die early, we're all going to die of lung cancer, we're all going to have premature death because the U.S. government is forbidding this EV mandate, which is not rational. Air pollution is one thing. Climate change regulations for greenhouse gas emissions, that's something else. But they conflated the whole thing, and they said that the federal government is preventing California from protecting the health of the globe, which is just not true. What it's doing, these waivers that we have from the Clean Air Act are causing gasoline to be more expensive, diesel fuel to be more expensive, electricity to be more expensive. We're paying for this. And eliminating these waivers puts California on equal footing with the other states, and that will bring prices down, which is very important.
let's sort of break down, because I'm so confused about what the rules are and who did what. First of all, the important point to make about why this was possible and had to be done quickly is that the Congressional Review Act is a very useful piece of legislation that allows you to overturn the previous administration's last minute scrambles within a certain time frame without, in the Senate, for example, the filibuster proof and stuff like that, isn't it? So that's why it's a very
Yes.
useful technique. And the
Yes.
Republicans used it very effectively in the first Trump administration, and it looks like they are again here. So that's great. The thing about it that confuses me is I thought we already had in California, prior to this, these rules and targets about EVs and banning gas cars. Wasn't that already the law or regulation, or what? How do they all fit together?
Well, the Clean Air Act dates to the 1960s, and California already had emission standards, so it was grandfathered to have its own tougher emission standards. But each one of these emission standards needs a waiver itself. So there's the one big waiver, and then there are all the little waivers. So things like, can you ban the sale of gas-powered leaf blowers needed a
Yes,
waiver. And
right.
the EV mandate needed a waiver, and the advanced clean trucks rule needed a waiver, and the NOx standard needed a waiver. And then there was also one, the advanced clean fleet rule, which applied to trucks. That one, the Biden administration did not approve. All of these others it approved in the waning days, which reflects, I think, how the economics of it were very harsh for the Biden administration and the Newsom administration, for their perspective. The economics are terrible. And these rules have to be feasible and cost effective under the law. And they're not. They're not feasible and they're not cost effective. If the technology doesn't exist, it's not feasible. And if it raises the price of living in California, it's not cost effective. But what they do is they say everyone's going to die unless we do this. And then that makes it cost effective. And that's literally how they fashion the analysis. So these regulations did not meet with favor for most of the Biden administration. In the last days, and we don't even know who did this, 3 of these waivers were approved for the EV mandate, the truck mandate, and the NOx standard. And the other one, the advanced clean fleet, was not approved, and CARB withdrew that regulation. So they're not even going to fight for that. Now where we're going with this is California is going to court to say that this revocation of the waivers is not legal, and we'll fight it out in court, and we'll see how that goes.
So is it so? Because I remember the very first time, I believe, we heard Newsom pushing the ban on gas cars. That was years ago during one of the fires. It was the most ridiculous thing. Do you remember he did that press conference in the middle of the wildfires, trying to make the connection between EVs and wildfires? That was about 5 years ago.
Yes, it was. He did this as an emergency during his COVID emergency powers. He banned gas-powered vehicles. He banned the sale of gas-powered cars, effective in, I think, 2035. And what does that have to do with COVID? Nothing, but he used his emergency powers to do it. But it couldn't take effect unless it got a waiver from the federal government. As I understand it, that's what this was. So it was just sitting there waiting for approval, and it didn't get approval till, I think, December of 2024. And of course, when Trump took office, he immediately said, we're not doing this. And he talked about reversing it, and now it's the Congressional Review Act. The Democrats say that the Republicans violated the rules of the Senate or violated the parliamentarians' interpretation of the Congressional Review Act, but the parliamentarians' interpretation is not binding law. There's no parliamentarian in the Constitution. So what the Senate says goes, and we'll see how it, as I said, we'll see how it turns out in court.
Well, what's super interesting there is that all these years that we've been talking about the EV mandates and the ban on gas cars and the ban on get trucks and leaf blowers and gas stove. Well, gas stoves is local, isn't it? But let's just stick to the cars. So all of that was not actually implemented law. It was regulations from CARB, but they hadn't taken effect. It shows a level of incompetence that if they cared about this so much, why didn't they get these waivers earlier?
Well, they tried to. And I think they ran into this buzzsaw on cost effectiveness, because it really says something that if the Biden EPA wouldn't approve them early, there was something really wrong. And then there was this furious burst of lobbying after Trump was elected, but before he took office. Furious lobbying to get the money, to get the rulings, to get the regulations, to get the approvals. But as you pointed out, when something is done on the way out the door, the next administration has the opportunity to reverse it.
Very interesting. So as of now, there's no ban on gas cars in California. Is that right?
As I understand it, as soon as the president signs this legislation, that's the end of the EV ban, of the EV mandate, of the gas car ban in California. But they will go to court, and they will probably find one federal judge who will try to enjoin the federal government's action and let California continue to do this. And if that happens, we have another one of these nationwide injunctions that will stand until the Supreme Court puts a stop to it. Which they may do at the end of June in one of these rulings from one of these cases, from all these different cases where they're challenging the idea that one federal judge can stop the whole executive branch and the legislative branch in this case from going forward with a policy.
So where do we stand on things like, is the leaf blower rule gone now?
I'd have to look it up. I think the leaf blower ban I think they did get the waiver on that one. I think that's in effect. But there was a list of like 7 or 10 or maybe more that were waiting for approval in December. I remember writing about this.
Well, I'm interested in it. I mean, it's a very live issue here in this. I've been driving through the Central Valley, a couple of stops here. I'll be back here tomorrow. The agriculture industry, very focused on it because you've got all these rules about electrification of farm equipment.
Yes.
That makes absolutely no sense. That just is insane when you think about how a farm actually operates. Is that now dead as a result of this?
I believe so. It definitely affects farm equipment because any kind of engine that runs on diesel fuel or gasoline that has emissions has to meet these tighter emission standards. So whether it's the truck rule or it's a separate one, definitely the California rules need a waiver from the federal government, from the EPA, in order to be stricter than the rest of the country. And we've had this in the past where people who had construction equipment and off-road engines, they had to get rid of all their equipment and sell it for pennies on the dollar because CARB changed the standard for what the engines could be. So the Obama administration was friendly to that. The Biden administration was friendly to that. The Trump administration is not friendly to that. And the cost is paid by the consumer. When the cost of farming goes up, when the cost of trucking goes up, when the cost of electricity and gasoline go up, the consumer is the one who pays the higher costs. And this is why California has the highest cost of living, because of these rules.
You're right. I mean, so many of the components of the cost of living, when you actually drill down to like, why is it so expensive? Whether that's housing, rent, electricity, gas, water, you end up with this climate ideology that's driving so much of the problem in California. But you think it's dead now? The farm thing is dead until it goes through the courts. Well, when the president signs it.
I believe the farm equipment would be included in these waivers that were reversed today in Congress, but we would have to check to see if they're under a different one. But in any case, these will all fall.
This is great day. Not as Gavin used to. And it is unbelievable, the gaslighting, if we can use that term. So he's trying to make out this is about smog or whatever. I think I saw the press conference. It literally said, "Make America smoggy again." Well, there's no connection, is there? Or is that at least, is there a tenuous connection with one bit of it, the nitrogen oxide?
Well, here's the connection. The waiver that we had from the Clean Air Act in the 1960s was there so we could clean up smog. And if you watch any old television shows from the 1970s, like Dragnet or whenever, they have a shot of the skyline and it's brown haze in front of the buildings. That was cleaned up. That was cleaned up by catalytic converters and other things working on actual air pollution. But the climate change rules affecting what the carbon dioxide emissions are, that's a whole different level of regulation. And it's much more intrusive on everything than the pollution rules were. And the California government has been using that same waiver to try to regulate greenhouse gases in a way that affects the whole country.
Which wasn't the point of the original Clean Air Act. It was about...
Exactly.
But does nitrogen oxide, to be fair to them, come under the legitimate use of this?
Well, if it does, then it's a question of degree. So if where we are right now is clean enough air, if you look out and you see the beautiful horizon and everything looks clean and people are not dropping dead from air pollution in the streets, which they are not, you can argue the statistics and how they arrived at them about these premature death numbers. They're very sketchy. But if we are happy with the air quality we have now, how much are we willing to pay to make it fractionally better? Because it's not a question of just would we like it to be better. It's a question of whether you want to drive businesses out of the state, whether you want no jobs, whether you want to pay more for everything. It's cost effectiveness. To get a fractional bit better is incredibly expensive. They never want to talk about that. They didn't even want to talk about how the changes to the low carbon fuel standard were going to raise gas prices 65 cents a gallon. They didn't want to talk about it. They only want to talk about asthma and death. They're not being truthful with the people of California. What they're proposing does not affect health in the way that they say it does, and what it costs, they don't want to talk about. By the way, poverty is the biggest risk to health of all. People who can't pay their bills, poverty is a tremendous risk to health.
Yes, exactly. Well, it sounds like a very good day.
It is a very good day.
All right, let's move on because you got some Los Angeles stories. We touched on one aspect of it last week, but give us the full picture now.
Well, the Los Angeles Times did a very interesting report and found that the LAPD is causing a lot of the liability that's bringing down the city budget, where the city budget's about $1 billion in deficit for the projected fiscal year. And some of that is because liability payouts were much higher than anticipated. And when you hear that LAPD has caused liability, you think, well, it must be some sort of excessive force type of thing. But no. In the last 5 years, $68.5 million paid out in these liability claims in settlements and court decisions over workplace harassment issues. It's the police themselves suing the department. Now, what caused this to start in the last 5 years? Well, it turns out that Governor Jerry Brown signed something in September 2018, just before he left office, Senate Bill 1300. And this redefined harassment in the workplace. So it wasn't just sexual harassment, it was harassment for just racial or any other kind of discrimination or ethnicity or anything, broaden the definition of harassment and change the standard. The standard, in order to file a complaint, used to be it had to be severe and pervasive. But after SB 1300, all you have to prove is that it bothered this one person. So it could be a remark, it could be a poster, it could be something that no one else was bothered by. But if it disturbed this person, then that person can go to a trial lawyer and file a lawsuit and get a settlement. And that's what's been happening in the last 5 years. It's the change of the definition. And interestingly, he vetoed a bill that would have allowed claims to be filed for 3 years instead of just 1 year. But the next year, Governor Newsom, when he took office, he signed something that removed the statute of limitations. Jerry Brown had understood how important it is to have those claims filed promptly. Gavin Newsom signed something that lifted the statute of limitations for sexual abuse claims, childhood sexual abuse claims, for going all the way back to the 1980s or even earlier. He allowed a 3-year window for claims to be filed, even though there are no witnesses or records, nothing can be proven, but the claims can be made. And the settlement that LA County agreed to for almost 7,000 claims that were filed, $4 billion. So some of these lawyers, $4 billion from LA County to almost 7,000 claimants. And some of these lawyers who are bringing these claims are representing, one of them, 1,200 different victims.
So this is LA County.
This is LA County.
What's
So
the total
LA,
budget?
it's more than that. I think it might be about $50 billion a year, but that's off the top of my head and I could be wrong.
Right.
But in order to pay this, they are having to drain the reserves, they are having to cut programs, and they are having to issue something called judgment obligation bonds, which will hundreds of millions of dollars in interest every year out to the year 2051.
Oh my
So
God.
that's right out of the budget that could be used to fix things. It has to be paid if it was paid to the victims, that would be one thing, but it's going to the trial lawyers. And how much will the victims get? Well, you'll love this. There's a panel of allocation experts who will decide how much the victims get. But the trial lawyers, they get their cut right off the top.
Well, if
And
it's anything like the PAGA lawsuits that the Private Attorney General Act, that's completely, like crushing businesses of all sizes that employ anyone in California. In those lawsuits, I mean, I was talking about it the other week at a strawberry farm in Ventura County. They're saying that of the settlements there, the lawyers take the 33% straight off the top, and then of the remaining 60 odd percent, 25% of that goes to the victims, 75% goes to the government, goes to the
that's the
state
law.
government.
That's the
But
law.
this time it's the government paying it.
Right. This time it's the government paying it. And the sad thing is when you have liability from a government entity, the people who were responsible for the abuse don't pay it. They've paid no price at all. They may be gone. We may not even know who they are at this point. There's no responsibility on the people who did the workplace harassment or sexual abuse. That's off the table for some reason. And what you have is the taxpayers paying these enormous settlements. And the interesting thing is that this was enabled by laws that were changed in Sacramento 5 or 7 years ago. Prior to that, there were rules about how fast the claims had to be filed. There were standards to eliminate more frivolous claims. There was a way that sometimes you could have arbitration clauses or release of claims as a condition of employment, because in certain circumstances that might be something that employers could reasonably request. Well, those are all gone now. Now it's just strictly what the trial lawyers wanted, which is the ability to go to court and sue for the jackpot.
Every day there's some new shambles that comes to light. It's so bad.
It's very expensive in California.
I
Bad
know.
policies have very high price tags.
Exactly. Well, I mean, just getting to grips with all of this is just going to be, a mammoth job, but, you've got to start somewhere. All right, Susan, thank you so much. That was really, really great information and detail as always. Very good news about this. Very interested to learn about the EV thing. That's encouraging.
It's all going to be hashed out in court, so we'll get all the
Yeah.
details straight when the filings go in.
Fantastic. All right. See you soon, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
So I am so excited to welcome to the show Gracie Vandermark. So if you watched my launch at Huntington Beach of my campaign, and if you didn't, why didn't you? But if you did, you will have seen Gracie make a wonderful, rousing speech for me. And so it's my great honor now to welcome you, Gracie, as a newly announced candidate. Tell us what you're running for. What's the story? What's going on?
So I'm actually running for the 72nd State Assembly District seat here in California. So it's brand new. We just decided to do this last week and just jump onto the campaign bandwagon.
So you're running for the State Assembly?
Yes, State Assembly 72nd District.
And so tell us about the district and who's there now and what's the deal?
So right now the seat is Diane Dixon's seat, but she'll be running for county supervisor. So her seat will be vacated. We're losing a strong Republican in Diane Dixon right now. So I stepped up to continue the legacy and fight for our communities and just try to protect that seat. It is conservative, but that area, it's the whole coastal area. It's Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Laguna Woods, Laguna Niguel, Aliso Viejo, and Lake Forest. So it's the whole coastal area, not a bad area to be in.
Amazing. So it includes Huntington Beach, where, of course, you've been such a dynamic force. For those who haven't followed the story of Huntington Beach, again, I can't really believe that anyone who listens to or watches this show wouldn't know the story. But remind everyone about the amazing story of Huntington Beach and your part in that, Gracie.
So when we were campaigning our council, because Huntington Beach has been traditionally conservative historically, we've always been conservative, but because we kept splitting votes, meaning too many Republicans would run, and even though we had the majority Republican votes, we would just split the votes to where we just lose the seat. So when we started campaigning, our council was a 6-1 against conservatives. So then
6-1 Democrat.
yeah, 6-1 Democrat. So what we did, Tony Strickland, Casey McKee, and Pat Burns and I, we got together. We campaigned for a year and a half together as a team, as a slate, and we were able to flip our council from a 6-1 Democrat to a 4-3 Republican. And then this next election that just passed, we were able to remove the last 3 incumbents and replace them with 3 more conservatives. So now we're a 7-0 Republican conservative council.
And at one point, you were the mayor of Huntington Beach.
I was the mayor last year here in Huntington Beach. We rotate being mayor. So last year I was the mayor, the first Latina mayor to serve here in Huntington Beach. So my mom was really, really excited about that. And our city's just so welcoming. And, you know, there's a lot of rumors about our city that we're horrible and we're not inclusive. I mean, they elected me and I was the mayor of this beautiful city. And now I'm at the point where I just want to give back in any way that I can.
And so tell us about what you did in that community, because I think that will give people a strong idea of what you will be fighting for in the assembly.
So the one thing that we brought back to our council is common sense governing, which does not exist in Sacramento right now. We did simple things such as government flags on government property. Everybody's equal. If you're a taxpayer and you're funding these buildings, we should remain neutral. We're also the only city in the state of California where we put voter ID on the ballot, and it passed overwhelmingly, where the community says, yes, we want voter ID. We want to secure our elections. The Democrats' excuse for not wanting voter ID is that low-income minorities like myself are going to be disenfranchised. We were poor. We weren't ignorant. We knew how to get an ID. And as a matter of fact, a lot of us end up in some kind of government assistance program. Like myself, I had to be on Medi-Cal. I had to be on WIC. I was a young mom. And the first thing they asked me for was for an ID when I went to apply for government aid. So it was insulting and racist for them to bring that up and say that we're too ignorant to actually get an ID. So we did that as well. We're also Parents' Right to Know City. We believe you as a parent have a right to know what's going on with your children, not the governor. The government should not decide how we raise our children. They don't have to agree with us, but they don't get to make that decision for us.
So what does that mean? Can I just on that one, what does that mean in practice? What did you change in Huntington Beach on parents and their right to know?
So the governor signed a bill, AB 1955, where the schools are not required to let a parent know if their child is trying to transition in school. And there is nobody better than the parent to advise your child and have their best interest at heart. So now these schools would be able to keep something as important as if you are confused about your gender. So what we decided to do in the city of Huntington Beach we passed a resolution declaring ourselves a parents' right to know city, where although we have no jurisdiction over the schools, we cannot get involved with the schools, but we do represent the parents. And if there are parents out there who say, I've been wronged, this school harmed my child, we want to step up and help them. Most people do not sue because it's tedious, it's expensive, it's overwhelming, and we want to be there to assist the parents and help them fight for their right to parent their own children.
And so go through some of the other things that you did.
Well, the homelessness, we're one of the 2 cities in Orange County where the homelessness was reduced. And we didn't do that by pushing the homeless people out of our city. We actually have an amazing homeless task force here in Huntington Beach. And we sat down with them when we first got elected, because when we were campaigning, we kept seeing homeless people. The first 3 blocks of Huntington Beach, you couldn't walk past there without tripping a homeless person. I mean, kids were seeing homeless people shooting up, homeless, mentally ill people running around, scaring our residents. So as a tourist city, we rely on our tourism. We want people to come back. We want people to feel safe. So once we won, we sat with our police chief and we said, tell us what you need from us. What tools do you need from us for you to do your job and make our city safer? So we signed a couple of ordinances that were helpful, and we've been very proactive in finding our homeless people the help that they need. And we actually reduced the cost that the former council had allocated for the homelessness. You know how the state of California, they're spending what, $1 billion on a homeless problem that they're never going to resolve. Where here in Huntington Beach, we realize that homelessness has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Why would you resolve the problem if you're actually becoming rich from it? So we decided here what we wanted was to prioritize safety. And so we went ahead and we find our homeless people the services that they need. If you're a veteran, we'll find you veteran services. If you're a woman that's homeless, we'll get you a woman's shelter. If you need mental help, we are working closer with the county because they have those resources that we're not prepared to offer. So we are actually getting them the help they need and prioritizing their needs and not just trying to generate revenue because of it. So when we first came, we had a homeless czar. His job, I said, okay, he called himself the homeless czar. He's actually in Palm Springs right now. And we asked him, why are you the homeless czar? Are you going to resolve the problem? He said, well, it's my job to go out and look for grants. I said, well, it's our goal to not need your
Oh
grant.
my gosh.
Yes. So
What an amazing, that's a brilliant story. It's such a great example of the wrong attitude. This sort of grow the government. It's all about the bureaucracy, not about actually solving problems.
Yes, he wanted to create our own little health department. We said, no, that's not our job. We want to resolve the issue. And if you can't resolve the issue and your goal is to get us more money to deal with it, then we're not going to work well together. So he ended up resigning. I think I want to say a few weeks later.
All right. So you talked about safety. I think just from my conversations with you and Tony and your other colleagues there, you did some great work on public safety generally, not just on the homeless aspect, but on crime and so on. Tell us about that.
So our crime rates have been reduced within every category. The only ones that have not were robberies, and that was because we had a gang of Chilean robbers that came here for a little while. But our crime has been steadily reduced because we have empowered our police department to do their job. We are 100% backing our police department so that they make sure they can serve the city and not worry about councils taking retaliation. Our job and our first priority is public safety. And we know and we understand that the only way to make that happen is to fully support our law enforcement, our first responders, our fire department. And in Huntington Beach, you know, as a beach city, we have a wonderful marine safety division as well.
And so when you put there's one other thing I want to get to that leads into your assembly race, which is more about the attitude you showed. But just in terms of when we're talking about the results, the best thing, I mean, I tell the story of Huntington Beach pretty much everywhere I go. And the thing that I always end with is to say that as a result of your leadership and all of you there, isn't it right to say that just recently Huntington Beach was rated the best run city in California?
Yes, so we've been very, very proactive as a team. And through our leadership, we received the award of being the best run city in Orange County. So we're very, very proud of that. And we're so happy because then people see that and they want to come and they want to see us. And that is our priority, public safety. Come to our city. We want to keep you safe. We want you to feel that you're part of our little suburban beach community and not just a stranger. But yes, definitely being declared the the best run city in Orange County has been a huge accomplishment for us.
So let's get to the attitude, because the other set of things that I think you're famous for, all of you there, and of course Michael Gates, who is the city attorney, good friend of ours, he's now with the Trump administration in the
Yes.
Department of Justice, but he was part of this as well, pushing back against Sacramento, pushing back against Gavin Newsom on a whole range of things. The first one that I really noticed was on housing. Tell us a little bit about that attitude of pushing back.
So we have a governor that really likes to use our legal system against us. He uses it in a punitive way. So when we came in, we sued the governor because he wants us to build 13,368 units in a city that is 95% built out, with the rest of the 5% being protected land like wetlands. And so a lot of cities have gone forward with adopting their housing element. What we decided this isn't fair. We love our city as it is, and we sued the governor. As a matter of fact, Tony Strickland and my name are also in the lawsuit, as well as with the city of Huntington Beach. So I'm really proud about that. We have to fight. We have to fight because he has this tendency of constantly suing us. And what we do is, if he sues us for something, and if we know we're right, we will sue him back. There's no other city that's doing that. And one reason that we feel that we have the ability to do that is because we do have an in-house legal department. So a lot of cities are looking at us and they're saying, we love what you're doing. We support what you're doing. We like that you are not letting the governor bully you and boss you around. And we want to support you. So I asked a lot of them, fine, are you going to jump in? Are you going to support us? And their response is always the same. Sorry, but we are waiting to see what the governor does with you guys first. It is no secret that the governor uses our legal system. He is engaging in lawfare against anybody that doesn't bow down to his demands. And that is a very open secret here. Everybody knows that that is what's going to happen, but we're not going to sit down and just bow down. We've had people from throughout the nation use our resolutions and our policies and implement them themselves. And we're hoping that we can bring hope and just let other people in the nation know we have normal people here in the state of California. We exist. We're fighting. And some people say, well, here, California, you get what you deserve. No, there are many, many, many of us who are fighting to change that. And here in Huntington Beach, we're that little hub. We're kind of being that little ripple that we hope that other areas in the nation can learn from and say, if they're fighting, we're going to fight. We haven't lost California. We can take it back. And we've already gained so many supporters, so many voters, especially in my Latino community. We're done. We're tired, and we're voting conservative. We're voting Republican because we're tired of being used.
Fantastic. And that spirit is so great. I mean, on housing, on voter ID, he sued you. You're suing back. I think on the sanctuary state law, and so on. It's fantastic. Well, listen, I think that attitude is what's going to propel you into the legislature. And I bet you they don't want you in that legislature, Gavin and all the crew.
I'm not expecting a red carpet welcoming committee. That's for sure.
Well, I love it. So I'm very, very happy and proud to support you in this, Gracie. I think it's going to be fantastic to see you there. What's the race like? Is there anyone else in it? Are you all set for this? How's it looking?
Well, right now we do not have anyone in that's going to challenge us. I'm sure there will be more people jumping in later. And the reason we declared early on and we announced my race was because in Huntington Beach, what we did, we campaigned for over a year and a half. We came out strong. We came out early so that we don't have a bunch of candidates and dilute the votes once again to where we lose once again. So we're using Huntington Beach tactics for a statewide seat, and we're hoping that we can just take that seat and keep it as a competitive seat.
So let everyone know how they can get involved, follow you, support you, and all of that.
So if you can support me, please, if you want to contact me at Gracie for Assembly, GRACEY FOR Assembly. Also, I have a website coming up. It's also going to be Gracie for Assembly. I will shoot you that information. And if you can donate, in California, the Democrats have a ton of funding. Conservatives, Republicans, we don't have as much. So if you can do that, that would be great. And share of the news with with everyone in your city, whether it's Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Laguna Woods, Aliso Viejo, or Lake Forest. Please let them know. We need to come together behind the strong candidates.
It's an amazing part of the state. It deserves an amazing representative in the state legislature. And I know that's going to be you, Gracie. Absolutely fantastic. So happy you're doing this. It's going to be great to see you up there in Sacramento. They don't know what's coming. It's going to be fantastic to watch. Thanks so much for being with us today, and good luck.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that is our show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Join us again next week for the Steve Hilton Show. Please join me on the campaign trail. You can keep up with everything that I'm doing. We post regularly on social media at Steve Hilton X. And of course, please get involved in this fight to save California. It's really, really important. We can't do it without this grassroots army. I keep talking about that, but it's really true. We're going to need to help registering voters, making sure everyone knows that this is a fight worth going for, because we can win in 2026. So please go, if you haven't already, to stevehiltonforgovernor.com. There's a button there that says get involved. Sign up for that. We're just getting organized, so you may not hear from us for a while. But if you sign up, I promise you, you will hear from us about how you can help save California and make this beautiful state truly golden again. We'll see you next week.